Hey there, in this video we're gonna work on factoring trinomials. Trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Let's try first when if a is equal to 1. So say I want you to factor something like x squared plus 5x plus 6. So these are the ones where you're looking for two numbers, and you may have done this back in algebra. Two numbers that multiply to 6 and add up to positive 5. So this is where you want the product to be, and this is what you want the sum to be, the middle term. So the product of two numbers that give you positive 6 and the sum to give you 5. So the numbers are 2 and 3, positive. So when we factor this, we can say this is x squared plus 2x plus 3x plus 6. And from here, we can factor by grouping. Right? I look at the first two terms and I can take out an x, going back to our greatest common factor, and I'm left with x plus 2. Plus, from these two terms, we can take out a 3, and we're left with x plus 2. So now my GCF is x plus 2. And so my final answer is going to be take out the GCF x plus 2, and you're left with x plus 3. And that will be your final answer. Now, some of you may be thinking, why is she doing that when you can go straight from here into 2x plus 2x plus 3? And that is true as long as the coefficient is 1, the leading coefficient of your trinomial. So let's try another. Okay, so we'll continue with another example. Say I want you to factor 3x squared plus 12x minus 15. And so notice that here is still a trinomial, and one of the things you should always do is there a GCF? So notice that here I have 3, 12, and negative 15, and so they all have a common factor of 3, and that is the largest one. So the greatest common factor is 3, which means we can take 3 out. So this will be 3, and we're left with x squared plus 4x minus 5. And now this is a trinomial with the leading coefficient of 1 inside the parentheses. So we can do our little cross here. We're looking for two numbers whose product is negative 5 and whose sum is positive 4. So what numbers do that for us? And so those numbers are negative 1 and positive 5. So those work. So that means we can go 3 times x minus 1 and x plus 5. You can also try it the long way, where we I did it as before, with the splitting up the middle term as 2x and plus 3x, so we could have done that here. So doing it it's called the BC way, is I could have said this is x squared minus 1x, right, with my minus 1, plus 5x, and then minus 5. And so we factor by grouping. So these two, we group them 2 at a time, since I have 4. So these two have an x in common, and you're left with x minus 1. These two have a 5 in common, and then you're left with x minus 1. So now what you're left with is x minus 1 is the GCF, and you're left with x plus 5, which gives us the same thing. Just don't forget about the original GCF that we pulled outside. So our final answer will be 3, the original GCF, times x minus 1 times x plus 5. And so let's try now something when a is not equal to 1. And so let's try factor 3x squared minus 16x plus 5. So notice again that I have a coefficient of 3, But unlike before, where 3 was common to everything, the 3, the 12, and the 15, now 3 is not common to 16 or 5. So there is no GCF here. So we have to factor. And there are other ways that you can factor. You can do trial and error. You can, sometimes you might be able to just see it and the factors come out. I still like to employ the BC method. So when you have a trinomial to form ax squared plus bx plus c, the BC method is where we find two numbers. And so you find two numbers whose product is BC, is B times C, and whose sum is B. So I still do my little cross here, and so I want two numbers whose product is 3 times 5. Or sorry, AC, not BC. It's the AC method. Is the AC method. So I want two numbers whose product is AC and whose sum is B. So 3 times 5 is 15. So I want two numbers whose product is 15 and whose sum is B, negative 16. And so what numbers work? The numbers that work are negative 15 and negative 1. So again, is the AC method. So you want two numbers whose product is AC and whose sum is B. And so once we find the two numbers, we are going to use factor by grouping to solve. So I'm going to rewrite this as 3x squared, so my first term stays the same and the last term stays the same. We use the two numbers here to rewrite the middle term. So the middle term is minus 16, but I'm going to rewrite it as minus 15x minus 1x, and then plus 5. And now we factor by grouping. So what do these two have in common? They have a 3x in common, and you're left with x minus 5. And the other two, when you consider them two different terms by themselves, so ignore the ones that are in the blue brace, then this is considered a negative leading coefficient, so you take the negative out. So we're going to take the negative one out, and you're left with x minus 5. So now the GCF here is x minus 5. And so we're going to take the x minus 5 out, and you're left with your 3x and the minus 1. And so that is the final answer. And let's try one more example. And again, this is just one way of doing it. You can do trial and error, right, where you try to figure out the combinations to get 3x squared, the combinations to get 5, and see what works for the middle term. Sometimes that can take a while, and so I tend to prefer this method because I know it's always going to work. So in this case, look at your coefficient of 5. First of all, does 5 go into anything else in here? And it doesn't, so I don't have a GCF. Always look for a GCF before you start factoring. So there's no GCF, so we're going to do I'm going to do the AC method, and you're welcome to do trial and error or whatever other method you prefer. So I'm looking for two numbers whose product is 5 times minus 6, so negative 30. I want two numbers whose product is negative 30 and whose sum is the middle term, minus 7. So what numbers work? What two numbers give us a product of negative 30 and a sum of negative 7? So the numbers that work are minus 10 and positive 3. Right, negative 10 times 3 is negative 30. Negative 10 plus 3 is minus 7. And so when we rewrite this, I am going to rewrite it as 5x squared. And the numbers that I found, right, I use these to rewrite my middle term. So my middle term is going to be minus 10x plus 3x. And the last term is left unchanged. So my ax squared and my c stay unchanged. You rewrite the bx term. And so now we factor by grouping. The first two, right, I have 4. Anytime I have 4 terms, we want to factor by grouping. So first two, they have a 5x in common. And what are we left with? You're left with x minus 2. The second grouping of 2, 3x minus 6, they have a 3 in common, a positive 3, so I put a plus 3. And once you take the 3 out, you're left with x minus 2. And notice that now the GCF here is x minus 2. So we take that x minus 2 out, and what are you left with? So once you take this out, I'm not canceling it, it's just you're taking it out. You're left with the 5x and the 3. So 5x plus 3. And that is our final answer. Of course, you should always be checking your factoring by multiplying it back out. Use the distributed property to multiply this back out. And I also show you how to do the box method in a previous video and to check your answer. Right, so I'm going to have x minus 2 and 5x plus 3. So I get 5x squared, 3x, negative 10x, and negative 6. And so notice that the middle term is going to be minus 7x. So I know that I did it right.